Our key verse that we want to read today is found in Psalms. Psalms chapter 78 and verses 5, 6, and 7. And it says, "For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children, that they might set their hope in God, and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments." So this was to be a process that was to exist inside of Israel. They were to teach the commandments of God to their children, and their children would teach them to their children and to their children, and it was to be this way forever. This is the way that God has designed that these things should work. The question is, does it work this way for us? Is this what we are doing? And are we taking this charge that God has given us and realizing the seriousness of that commission? So I want to read to you, this is found in Adventist Home, page 186. And it's, I think, important for us to understand the signs of the times. It says, "Satan is marshaling his hosts, and are we individually prepared for the fearful conflict that is just before us? Are we preparing our children for the great crisis? Are we preparing ourselves and our households to understand the position of our adversaries and their modes of warfare?" Their modes of warfare. What is that? The way they attack. How does Satan work? We are to train our children how Satan will attack. Why? So they can see it coming so that they can properly defend. Right? Now, often I think what happens is we try and shield our children from some of these things, but we're going to have to get pretty serious and pretty open and honest with them about what's coming. Right? Are our children forming habits of decision that they may be firm and unyielding in every matter of principle and duty? I pray that we all may understand the signs of the times, and that we may so prepare ourselves and our children that in the time of conflict, God may be our refuge and defense. So I'm going to focus primarily, and we've heard from many we've had great studies so far this camp meeting. It's been wonderful. I'm going to focus primarily on the practical aspects of how do we do this. Again, we're going to try and get past the theory into the practice of this. So, where is our work to begin? And there's two key concepts here I'll share. These, again, are very critical. The restoration and uplifting of humanity begins in the home. Just let that sink in for a minute. It does not begin in the mission field or the church. It begins in the home. The work of parents underlies every other. The well-being of society, the success of the church, the prosperity of the nation depend upon home influences. This is a fearful and solemn work that we must do, friends. Our work for Christ is to begin with the family, in the home. The education of the youth should be of a different order. That is to say that it is not the way that we think it is. It's a different order. We're going to dig in on that. From that which has been given in the past. Their welfare demands far more labor than has been given them. There is no missionary field more important than this. Wow. Yeah. Wow. I have to confess, I don't think that I've done this. And often, the privilege that I get to give studies, they're never for you guys. They're always for me. And so I have learned a lot. I'm very grateful to the Lord for the privilege of this study because I have learned where I am not doing what I should be doing. So the reality of it is, why is this the case? Why is the greatest mission field the home? Okay, it's where they learn to be missionaries. It's, right? What is the church comprised of? Right? Families, right? What is it? What do we say, right? Strong individuals make strong families make strong churches make strong fields. So that is the core, right? When we look at an organism in nature, it's comprised of individual cells. The family is an organism. It is comprised of individual cells that, as they cooperate and work together, right, form a living and working being. The reality of it is the greatest evidence of the power of Christianity that can be presented to the world is a well-ordered, well-disciplined family. This will recommend the truth as nothing else can, for it is a living witness of its practical power upon the heart. A living witness. Do you look at your families as a living organism? Yes. Right? Well, what happens if one of those members is not doing well? The whole isn't doing well. Right? So this again is where we have to change the way that we view these things, that we can look at them properly. So let's dig in and let's start talking about how should we train a child. This is found in Christian Education, page 5. It says, Solomon says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. This language is positive. Okay, and this is an important concept. Some things are framed negatively, some things are framed positively. This is positive. The training which Solomon enjoins is to direct, educate, and develop. The training that Solomon here is talking about enjoins to direct, educate, and develop. Okay? It's key concepts. We're going to dig deeper in on that. In order to parents and teachers to do this work, they must themselves understand the way the child should go. It embraces more than merely having a knowledge of books, whether they be spiritual or whether they be more traditionally academic. Okay? It takes in everything that is good, virtuous, righteous, and holy. It comprehends the practice of temperance, godliness, brotherly kindness, and love to God and to each other. In order to attain to this object, the physical, mental, and moral and religious education of children must have attention. Now, a couple of key concepts. This takes into account everything. This is everything, right? The religious, the moral, the physical, the mental, all of the aspects of a child's life. Now, a couple of key concepts here. It also deals with the practice. So what happens is, how do you learn? Okay, he learns by doing. Anybody else want to say how they learn? Oh, is it the same for everybody? No, we have to take into account how each individual person learns, right? Some are visual learners, some may be auditory learners, right? It's not all the same, is it? Okay, so some study of the person that you're teaching has to be made. We have to understand, how do they learn? Now, how did I do that? I didn't show you the picture. I experimented. Okay? You have to experiment. Look at your child. They should be your study. Okay? We have to understand, how does this child work? They're all different. All right, now, when we look at how we learn, when we talk about this as a process, the very first step is you must have knowledge, education, right? So we start with the theory of understanding. Now, is that enough? No. It's not. Oh, okay, we have to figure out, how do I put it into practice? Throughout this entire camp meeting, if you do not take the lessons that you have learned and put them into practice, what is going to happen with the education that you've been given? You will lose it. Satan will take it from you. So again, this has to get its way into the practice of the life. You should be looking at everything you learn and asking the question, how do I put this into practice? Right? Because ultimately, if I don't get there, I'll lose it, no matter how good it is. Okay? So, now, when I put it into practice, do you have it? Have you learned it? Ooh, some are in question. Is there another step?
Keep doing it.
Okay, keep doing it. There is actually another step. I have to teach it. I have to teach it. Okay? I'll give you an example real quick, and I'm going to try and go quick because I'm running short on time. When Mariah, my eldest daughter, was young, maybe 3 or 4, my wife was in the kitchen baking, and the oven was on. It was quite hot, and Mariah wants to be in her skirts right there at the stove, and I was pulling her back, telling her, hey, the stove's hot, you're going to burn yourself. I took her hand, I put it up to the stove, and I said, hot, hot, right? You got to be careful, this is going to hurt you. All right, so Tabitha kind of kept pushing her back. But Mariah, of course, wanted to go closer, because the moment I drew attention to the fact that this is something to pay attention to, now I'm fixated on it, right? So we left the kitchen, and I watched as Mariah snuck back into the kitchen. And I, maybe a bad parent, but I let her go. And I let her go. I let her do whatever she was going to do. I had given her instruction, right? It was up to her whether or not she was going to follow it. And I watched at the edge of the kitchen door, and she touched the stove, and she burned her finger. Because she's hard of head. So, yeah. Yep. All right. Now, immediately, she drew her hand back, and I went in, and I comforted her, and I said, hot. It's hot. I was trying to tell you that it'll burn you. Light dawned. I could see it in her eyes. Hot, right? She had it. She had learned, right? Okay. Later, 20 minutes later, my wife comes in. She's standing at the stove, and Mariah's there. Hot, Mama. Hot, right? She was sharing it, right? She had learned that lesson. She was ready to teach it. Okay, so this is an important concept. No matter how shy you may be, you need to teach it. When you teach it, you own it. It is yours, okay? All right, so let's dig deeper into this. Basically, we're going to focus on some few key concepts and some practical examples on how do we put this into practice, okay? So this is found in an appeal to mothers. You may inquire, how can we remedy the evils which already exist? How shall we begin the work? If you lack wisdom, go to God. He has promised to give liberally. Pray much and fervently for divine aid. One rule cannot be followed in every case. The exercise of sanctified judgment is now needful. Be not hasty and agitated, and approach your children with censure. Such a course would only cause rebellion in them. Censure causes rebellion. I know, for many of you, this is a hard one. It's been a hard one for me. Yes, ma'am. The quote, where is it found? Yeah. It's found in an appeal to mothers, page 20, paragraph 2.
What does censure mean?
Ryan, You are such a horrible young person. You cannot do that ever again. Do you hear me, sir?
You don't understand that word. How old are you? Right, gotcha.
Okay. Does anybody learn this way? No. Does Jesus treat you this way? What does Jesus say? Come, let us reason together. Hey, let me help you to learn how this works. Right? There's a key concept here. Such a course would only cause rebellion in them. You should feel deeply over any wrong course you have taken, which may have opened a door for Satan to lead your children by his temptations. Before you engage in the work of teaching your children the lesson of self-control, you should learn it yourself. If you are easily agitated and become impatient, how can you appear reasonable to your children while instructing them to control their passions? I have been guilty of this. My children, I'm sorry. This is a tough one. The key concept here, friends, is you cannot give what you do not have. Okay? This will force you to grow. This is part of why God gave you children. Okay? This is going to push you. Okay? And hopefully God has placed love in your hearts for your children, that you are willing to sacrifice your sins, even your cherished ones, to learn, to become a better person, that you can teach your children to become better people and to overcome the sins that you have more than likely given them. Right? Got to start first and foremost with us. This is found in, again, Christian Education. Page 6, paragraph 1. In households and in schools, the education of children should not be like the training of dumb animals. For children have an intelligent will, which should be directed to control all their powers. The dumb animals need to be trained, for they have not reason and intellect. The human mind must be taught self-control. I'm starting to see a theme here. Right? It must be educated to rule the human being, while the animal is controlled by the master. The beast is trained to be submissive to his master. The master is mind, judgment, and will for his beast. A child may be so trained as to have, like the beast, no will of his own. His individuality may even be submerged in the one who superintends his training. And the will is, to all intents and purposes, subject to the will of the teacher. This is not how it works. Okay? Why? Children who are thus educated will ever be deficient in moral energy and individual responsibility. Okay? They have not been taught to move from reason and principle. We are not, come let us reason together. We're do what I say. Do what I say. Don't ask questions, just do what I say. That is not how God teaches us. That is not how we can teach our children. Their will was controlled by another, and the mind was not called out that it might expand and strengthen by exercise. They were not directed and disciplined with respect to their peculiar constitution and capabilities of mind, to put forth their strongest powers when required. This is not about how well you tell your children what to do. This is about how well you educate and teach and develop in them their ability to tell themselves what to do. Right? Because at some point in time, they're going to leave you. And they're going to have to be able to make decisions for themselves. When we talk about why are children leaving the church, It's because there's no value. They've not seen the value in it. Because all we did was tell them, do what I tell you. Right? Again, this is not how it works. Teachers should not stop here, but give special attention to the cultivation of the weaker faculties. What are your children not good at? That all the powers may be brought into exercise and carried forward from one degree of strength to another, that the mind may attain to due proportion. You need to understand where your children are weak, that you can lift them up and teach them to be stronger. And notice that we go from grace to grace here as well, right? The goal is that they go from strength to strength to strength. That when your children are learning, they're experiencing victory, right? Nobody wants to be a Christian if all they do is defeat, 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 right? What do they need? Victory, victory, victory. But we have to give them small victories in the things of the daily life. When they're finding success, and they know that you're happy and you're proud of them and they're winning, then what do they want to do? Let's do more winning, Mom. Right? Okay. So in this process, again, we're talking about the character of how we're teaching, but in this process, we have to focus on the practical. It has to be practical. This is found in Adventist Home, page 145. The germination of the seed represents the beginning of spiritual life, and the development of the plant is a figure of the development of character. As parents and teachers try to teach these lessons, the work should be made practical. Let the children themselves prepare the soil and sow the seed. I know, mothers and fathers, that this is going to slow things down. You are not going to get as much done in a day as you think you are. This is not about how much you got done in a day. If you teach one lesson and you teach it well to your child in that day, what have you done? Missionary work. You are saving the world, society, the nation, the church. All depend upon what you're doing. This is critical. Is that more important than whether or not you got the dishes done? Yes, it is. It is. Our focus is in the wrong place. Yes, I know all of the housework needs to get done. I do. But guess what? As you train your children, you're going to find a whole bunch more helpers. Right? And now all of a sudden you can work together. We'll talk more about that here in just a minute. As they work, the parents and teachers can explain the garden of the heart with the good and the bad seed sown there, and that as the garden must be prepared for the natural seed, so the heart must be prepared for the seed of truth. No one settles upon a raw piece of land with the expectation that it will at once yield a harvest. Diligent, persevering labor must be put forth in the preparation of the soil, the sowing of the seed, and the culture of the crop. So it must be in the spiritual sowing. And I chose this quote for a reason. Because not only does it illustrate the practical nature of what we must do, but you must also follow this in preparing the soil of your children's hearts. Right? This is the first step. So I want to talk about failure. How many of you like failure? Why not?
Well, you learn, but it wastes time, money, patience.
Man, do we need to read Romans 5:1 through 1 through 6? Maybe. What's Romans, Brother Bauer? I know you might know this by heart. Romans 5, 1 through, is it 1 through 5, I believe?
Romans 5, 2, 3, or 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Not only shall I glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation worketh patience, patience experience, and experience hope.
And hope maketh not ashamed, because the love of God is shed abroad in our hearts. So this is the process by which the love of God is shed abroad in your hearts. Encourage you to go look that up. I'll read this to you and we'll talk about it. We should teach our children habits of patient industry. We should beware of indulging them too much. When they meet with difficulty in their labor, and they will, okay, we must help them through it instead of carrying them over it. It might be easier for us at the time to do the latter, but we fail to teach a useful and valuable lesson to our children of self-reliance and are preparing the way to greatly increase our cares in the end. We should wake up in our children generous, noble principles and urge them to active exertions, which will shield them from a multitude of temptations and make their lives happier. Failure is not any parent's first choice for their children. I'm going to tell you, it's a necessary one. Failure is God's last means of teaching. If you will not listen, failure will be your sure result. However, failure is designed not to destroy you, but to teach you. Now, my children know this phrase because I repeat it to them more than they care to hear it. These things are not happening to you. They are happening for you. I know my church family knows it as well. She's like, I got it. Right? These things are not happening to you. They're happening for you. Okay? Even if you failed. Right? What can God do if you have failed and you have sinned? What can God do with that? Nothing. The only thing he can do is forgive you. God himself cannot go back and change the past. Right? So again, the important thing here is to help them through this. They're going to fail. We need to help them through this. Now, very quickly, I want to give you a practical example. Who here is really horrible at math? I mean, like, bad.
Bad.
Okay. Can you add, subtract, multiply, and divide? Yes? Have you taken algebra? Can you do algebra?
No, I took it, I did it, I passed it. But
No?
I still am not good at it.
You passed it, but okay. All right, who wants to volunteer? Nobody who can do the algebra. Do either one of you wish to help me out?
Still count on my fingers.
Yeah, okay, come on here, help me out. You're up close. So please stand up. All right. So I'm going to be with you step by step.
I hope so.
Okay, I've got your back.
Okay.
We're going to do this together. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So so let's say I've got an algebra equation here. 9x plus x equals 30.
I have no idea.
I know you're going, hey, who's this x? What do I do with the x, right? Don't worry about the x.
Okay.
All that x means, and for those of you who know this, don't holler out the answer. All that x means, it means it's something we don't know. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out what is it we don't know, right? Okay. Now, the first step here, if I have 9 apples and I add 1 apple, how many apples do I have?
10.
10 apples. So 9x plus x is what? 10 x's, right?
I'm lost.
Walk with me.
I'm telling you.
If I have 9 apples
Yeah.
and I add 1 apple,
You have 10 apples.
I got 10 apples, right? You with me? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Now, hold on a second. Now, you remember how that God said that, we've taught that you should be neat and tidy, right? Actually, 1 Corinthians tells us that let all things be done decently in order. So there's an order and a process to this. We've got to follow the order. Now, I know that many of you may be able to remember that we have 10 apples,
Yeah.
but we should always make sure that we follow a proper process. And that means that you should rewrite the equation after you perform a function. So we need to rewrite this, okay? Just because what happens if you don't put your shoes back where they belong? Can't find them. I forget where I left them, right? So again, there's a key concept here. You got to make sure that you're putting it back where okay. Now, when we see 10x, there's a key thing here that's going on. And the key part of this equation is that equal sign. What that equal sign is telling us is that what's on this side of the equation is equal to what's on this side of the equation. Okay? They're the same. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to play a game. And this game is get x by itself. Okay?
Okay.
So we want to get x by itself because then we know x equals this,
Okay.
right? And then we know what we don't know. You with me?
Yeah.
All right. So the way that we do that is we're going to do the opposite of what is being done to the x. So what you may not know is when we look at 10x, what that really is saying is 10 times x. It's multiply, okay? So if we're multiplying now, what's the opposite of multiplication? Division, right? The opposite of adding is subtracting. The opposite of subtracting would be adding.
Yeah,
Okay, the opposite of multiplying is dividing, right? You with me?
I guess. You say so.
I say so.
You say-
All right, well, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide, okay?
Okay.
So 10x. Now, 10 divided by 10 is what?
10 divided by 10?
Or 10 by 10, yeah. 10 divided by 10 is what?
10 divided by 10?
It's just 1,
It's 1, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just 1.
That's true.
All right, how many times does 10 go into 30?
3 times.
Okay, so that leaves me with 1x, and that x equals 3.
Well,
Now-
I could have told you that way back up there. I mean, that was easy.
It was. Congratulations, you can still do algebra. Now, I know. So, the key concept here is we go step by step. Even though they might be worried and scared, give them courage, okay? And what are we going to do? What did I do? I folded in a biblical lesson into an algebra lesson, right? Teach them where they are. All right? Every day can be a learning experience. I know I'm over time. Do I have just a couple minutes? Yeah, is that all right? I apologize for that. There's just a couple of quotes I want to share with you real quick. Okay, by precept and example, parents are to teach their children to labor for the unconverted. The children should be so educated that they will sympathize with the aged and afflicted and will seek to alleviate the sufferings of the poor and distressed. They should be taught to be diligent in missionary work and from their earliest years, self-denial and sacrifice for the good of others and the advancement of Christ's cause should be inculcated that they may be laborers together with God. Inculcated, big word. Anybody know what it means? Sorry? Taught, yeah. To consistently instill. Yeah. Included in their education, okay? This has to be woven in. That is to say, we should expect our children to do missionary work, okay? But here, let me ask you a quick question. See, you guys didn't know there was going to be a test. Where do we begin missionary work?
In the home.
In the home. Okay, good job. But if they ever learn to do genuine missionary work for others, they must first learn to labor for those at home who have a natural right to their offices of love. Every child should be trained to bear his respective share of service in the home. He should never be ashamed to use his hands in lifting some home burdens or his feet in running errands. While thus engaged, he will not go into paths of negligence and sin. How many are wasted hours? Thank you. How many hours are wasted by children and youth which might be spent in taking up their strong young shoulders and assisting to lift the family responsibilities which someone must bear, thus showing a loving interest in father and mother. They are also to be rooted in the true principles of health reform and the care of their own bodies. Friends, you also have to teach your children health reform, okay? And how to care for themselves. Proper hygiene is hugely important. This is critical. You are not giving your child a break. You are not giving them some rest when you spare them to take out the trash can, okay? They should do that. It's not an earth-shattering amount of effort, right? Okay. So I'll close with this last slide. Isaiah 49:25 tells us, "But thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. For I will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save thy children. Amen. Friends, God wants to cooperate with you to save your children. But let us not make this harder on him. This is a partnership. He gave us these children as our charge, and it is our responsibility to follow his plan of education and teaching. This is going to take time. You are going to have to spend time with your children, and you are going to be better off for it. I know I have been renewed in my heart a commitment to spend more time in teaching and educating my children. Amen. The reality of it is, this is again our key verse. I'll let you read it. This has been God's commandment to us. It is our charge to teach these things to our children. And as we learn these things, you are going to find that not only are you going to save your children, but you will become a better missionary yourself. And through helping your children to learn the lessons that Christ has taught you, you are going to save your own soul. You are going to save your own soul. Because you are going to have to learn these principles in order to teach them.